So yeah, just imagine taking a Model T Ford with an old Magneto, guys, in the dark on this road. Anytime you take your foot off the throttle, your lights are going to dim. Okay guys, so Sasquatch Prospector here. Here we are. It's the Milkameen Valley, yet again. Stemwinder Provincial Park. So we're gonna do Hedley, guys. One of the greatest gold camps in British Columbia. And I mean, like, in the top 3, guys. You've got Bridge River, which we did, Braylorn. You've got Rossland, and then Hedley. The Nickel Plate, the Mascot, the French mine, whole bunch of different mines in here. The Nickel Plate was kind of the big one, guys. That was the most prodigious producer. Gold Mountain, that's a mine on the other side, on the south side of the valley. Gold Mountain, we'll go check that mine out at another date. That's a whole nother, it's on the south side, completely different road, Gold Mountain Road. Totally different video, guys. So Hedley gets its name from mining engineer Robert Hedley. And in 1896, 1897 area, prospecting had begun. It's kind of a funny story with Hedley. So Bill Barley says when you watch the Gold Trails and Ghost Towns episode for Hedley, he's like, oh yeah, it was like these 2 greenhorns came to the mountain and asked these old prospectors where to go look. And the guy told them go up over the mountain and they found the Nickel Plate. And it was this whole kind of, you know, story that sounded awfully convenient. And when you go to the museum in Hedley, they tell you that's wrong, guys. That's not. I love Bill Barley. He does great stuff, but he was known for telling stories, tall stories, right? So, but I love Bill Barley. He's great. But that was not the case, guys. There had been prospecting here before. Guys had been mining and prospecting in and around this area since about 1894 when the Dewdney Trail, we're following the Dewdney Trail. Edgar Dewdney, he came through this area. He got guys to stake claims up on Nickel Plate in 1894, but nothing really came of it because nobody really knew. The other thing about Canadians, guys, is before a lot of the Americans came up, we didn't really do much hard rock prospecting. Most of the British were looking for placer diggings because that's kind of what they knew and they knew how to mine. So all creeks, right? So they would go up all the creeks and look for placer nuggets, but they weren't focused on lode gold, hard rock mining. So a few years went by, then a guy by the name of Peter Scott, who was, you know, he wasn't doing too well. He didn't have all that much money, or, you know, he was out of work kind of a thing. He was down on his luck, so he got a grub stake, which is what they did back in the day, from Robert Hedley, who was a mining engineer up in the Kootenays. And Robert Hedley, which Hedley is named after, basically grub staked Peter Scott. Then Peter Scott staked claims up and around the area. Same thing though, not much came of it. And then these 2 guys, Wollaston and Constantine Arundel, 2 British guys, they came to the mountain. Basically, they just went up Nickel Plate and they found the Sunny Side, the Nickel Plate, and there's a couple other claims they found, about 5 of them. And they staked all these claims. And then they took the samples. Where the interaction of mining begun was they took these samples, Wollaston and Arundel, they took these samples down to New Westminster. There was a trade show for mining in New Westminster because New Westminster used to be a huge capital for mining and sternwheelers and transportation and trains back in the day. Now it's just a kind of a modern city. So the thing about the trade show was when they went to the trade show, they got in contact with the fella by the name of M.K. Rogers. And M.K. Rogers was an American mining engineer who was actually on his way to go up to the Cassiar, but diverted because he saw these ore samples at the trade show, and he was told that it came from the south. And so then they started to, you know, he wanted to investigate. So then he went up to here, and so kind of began. And there's more to the story, but we're here now. So let's go look around Hedley to show you guys some of the mining equipment. There's an old ore cart from the Nickel Plate. So we're just going to go take a look, guys. Okay, guys, so here we are, Hedley. So there's some little artifacts. So let's go see what's going on here. Old bucket. Looks like a drag bucket for a drag line, for a shovel. Drills, very important for drilling rig. One of the towers for the trams. So what have they got? They got rocker boxes here, all the different drills, the drifter, the sinker, the stoper. Obviously stoping is for drilling up, drifting is for doing sideways, sinker is for going down, furnace and air diffuser. Oh, nice. And then belts, how they run the mills, guys. You can see you get one, as soon as you get one shaft spinning, you get a whole bunch of different belts that you can run things off of. We'll go in the museum and do a little bit of research now and take a look. We've been here before, but it's good to always like to come and because they have information here. They see, okay, so this is good, guys. So these are the claim maps. The Rollo, that was Peter Scott's claim that he staked from the grub stake that Robert Hedley gave him. Oh, Sunnyside. Nickel plate, Sunnyside. The Copperfield, that was another one. There you go, Hedley Camp, late 1890s. Constantina Rundell, Francis Wollaston staked their nickel plate, Bulldog, Horsefly, Sunnyside, and Copperfield claims in 1898. Wollaston and a Rundell, guys. Yes, it was 1898, but there had been prospecting going on in the area since like the early to mid 1890s. Nickel plate crew. That's the nickel plate crew, guys. Oh, Nick Picard. This is one of the famous pictures Bill Barley had. Yeah, Nick Picard. That's Nick Picard there, guys. Quite a character, apparently. The Sunnyside claim had one of the more sizable ore bodies on the nickel plate mountain. The metal candle holders. Oh yeah, Sticking Johnnies, yeah. These little candle holders here, those were all Sticking Johnnies. But that's Nick Picard, guys. And then that's the Sticking Johnny. That's what the Sticking Johnny would have looked like. So this is, the pointy end goes, like you see here, it goes into the timber, guys. And then this was to hang things on. And then this was for biting. This was, you could put it in your mouth and walk through the mines with your mouth, with it in your mouth. Hand drilling contests. They used to have drilling contests all the time. Diamond drill rig for exploratory drilling. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, you see this shows you the drill holes, right? Diamond drill, proposed, and then this is the vein, right? So they're drilling through quite a lot. See what I was saying? How, like, just because there's nothing on the surface, there could be something right underneath the vein, guys. You never know. You just don't know. But it's part of the thing. Oh, this is ore, very important. So this is some of the ore from the area, guys. You can see very similar to what we've been looking at out in the bush there. The Daly Reduction Company, Marcus Daly, guys. Flow sheet of gold mining. Oh, perfect. Ore from crushers, 40 stamp battery, 1,050 pounds, crushing in cyanide solution. Classifiers, tube mills. Yeah, you can see the gold scales. These are all core samples. So this mucking machine and ore cart setup, this is from the nickel plate, guys. This was taken out of the nickel plate. So this would have been in the nickel plate, 1 ton ore cart. Little scraper on the back. Pretty beautiful. The Mascot mine is up there, guys, right there where my finger is, dead center, up there. That's the Mascot. That's the tramway. The Daly Reduction plant was right here. We'll go over and look at it. You can actually see the remnants of it still. You can see the tram line with the power lines. But this is the main street of Hedley, guys. This is Hedley. Hedley Trading Post. This is kind of the Heritage Park. That's the Daly Reduction plant, Marcus Daly, Montana, Butte, Montana mining magnate. There's the Crow's Nest Highway. The Gold Mountain mine is on the other side of the mountain. So we're about to turn on to Hedley Nickel Plate Road. So this is quite the road, guys. So we're gonna snake up the switchbacks. So before the 1930s, if you wanted to get up, we're gonna head up to the Nickel Plate mine. If you wanted to get up to the Nickel Plate mine, you'd have to take the Green Mountain Road, which we're also gonna take, which is a long way, all the way around. You gotta go to Karamias and then up through Olalla, get the Green Mountain Road, and then come up through there to the Nickel Plate. They built this road in the 30s, and when they initially built it, people did not like this road, guys. It was really narrow. It snakes all the way up this mountain through like a series of really, really, really sharp switchbacks. It was really narrow. One of the guys who lived up here, his name was Ambrose Tree. He was quite a, that was his name. He was quite a character. He drove a Model T Ford up here, and I don't know if nobody probably knows, because I doubt few people have driven it, but the thing about Model Ts were they ran on a magneto, so there was no battery power. So it was your throttle was what made the lights bright. And so he was driving up this hill or this road when it was much, much narrower in a Model T. And every time he went over a pothole or took his foot off the throttle, the lights would dim. So you're trying to drive up here in the middle of the night, or at night, in a Model T Ford, and your lights are your lights are freezing, right? Or your lights aren't working. And so it's basically like this. It's a huge bunch of switchbacks all the way up. It takes you to the nickel plate mine. Now the short way to get up to the nickel plate mine from Hedley was to take the tram. But the problem, this is actually wider than I expected. But the problem with the tram was it was not safe, guys. Riding a tram is incredibly dangerous because if the tram, especially gravity tram, if the brakes gave way or the tram gave way or anything gave way at all, you'd be going down with the load, right? So the company and people in the town generally didn't like to ride the tram, but a lot of the miners, that's what they did. They would ride the tram up and down the nickel plate. In the wintertime, you can go skiing down the mountain to Hedley as well. But there was a whole Townsite up here, guys, the nickel plate. That's Townsite nickel plate. So we're meandering along right now, making our way up. That was just a pothole. Oh, that's sharp. So yeah, just imagine taking a Model T Ford with an old Magneto, guys, in the dark on this road. Anytime you take your foot off the throttle, your lights are going to dim, right? Because of the Magneto. So it was intense. You can see though, we're starting to come into sagebrush, and it's just straight up the mountain, guys. Literally, we're going straight up the mountain. Happy I got my mud terrains on for this. You wouldn't want to go down this as much. You'd want it. This is an uphill. Because downhill, it's your brakes, and your brakes don't work very well. That's actually a trick, guys, for all you guys that aren't mountain people. If you have a lot of switchbacks and steep grades like this, the best way to, what you got to do is you got to look at the road, you've got to look at the direction, you've got to look at the orientation of it, and drive up the hilly section, guys. Drive up the section that has the most switchbacks and the most hills. Because, like, for example, we're driving up to the nickel plate via this road, but if you had gone up Green Mountain Road, like we're going to take down, that one's not as bad as this. So you're driving up and you don't really, you're like, oh, this isn't too bad. But then you'd have to brake all the way down this hill, right? You'd be going downhill, and like these are sharp grades, guys. This is like, this road is no joke. Lots of switchbacks though. When they plowed the snow, guys, in the wintertime, guys would have their dozers when the road was really not as wide, believe it or not. This is widened. Guys would have their tracks for their cats about 2 inches over the side of the mountain. So you'd have literally your machine is riding over the side of the mountain. You're free hanging your tracks about 2 inches over the side of the mountain. And people would drive this in the wintertime. Guys would plow this. The guys that were, when they widened it, a bulldozer started from the top and a bulldozer started from the bottom, and they met in the middle. But just imagine being the equipment operator in charge of running this, right? Like, it's rocks everywhere. And guys, this is, if you don't have a truck, I wouldn't come up here. You need the clearance. Like, I'm doing this in 2-wheel drive because I know what I'm doing, but for most people, if you get stuck up here and you don't have 4x4, yeah, don't come up here unless you got a proper off-road vehicle and unless you understand how to drive on mountain roads. And like I said, pro tip, drive up to the nickel plate this way. Do not go around the other side, because then you're gonna have to drive down the mountain this way, and that's really gonna not be, you're not gonna like that. And the biggest thing to note, guys, is any off-roaders, you're not gonna stop well on this road, right? This is all rocks and loose gravel. So you think you're gonna stop, but you're just gonna skate right off the side. And we're literally now, we're like 1,000 feet plus up. We've just been climbing. We're almost done the, oh, my seatbelt's locking up. I hate that about off-road. We're almost done. So yeah, it's starting to, we're up at the top now. So we're gonna have a few more switchbacks, and then we're gonna be up on the mountain in the mine area, and then we're gonna come down Green Mountain Road, which is a little less. There is a couple switchbacks, but it's nothing like this. This is extreme, guys. This is one of the more extreme roads in British Columbia. I've also got mud tires, it should be said, so that's why I can rock 2-wheel drive out here on this road. Whenever you're driving to mountains, you always check directionally which way has the most switchbacks and the steepest grades, and then you try and drive accordingly. Obviously, that's not always possible, but that's what you want to do. So we're driving up to the nickel plate. So like I said, before this road was built, and now it gets narrow, Jesus Christ.
More narrow.
It gets more narrow than it's already been.
My lip just focused.
That's why you want high clearance too.
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to drive over big boulders on the road. This is an off-roader's road. This is not a, like I said, this is not like I'm taking my Honda Civic up here. Holy shit, we're getting up there. But imagine driving up every day to go to work, guys. So guys, that tram that we saw that went down to the Daly mill, the cyanide mill there, that was from the nickel plate. So that tram went all the way from the nickel plate down to Hedley, down to the Daly Reduction plant. And at the reduction plant, they were basically crushing the ore up into various sizes, separating the tailings, right, the stuff that's not as good, from the actual ore, and then they would put it through a series of cyanide, like a cyanide process, to basically put the gold into a solution with the cyanide, and then that would get sent to a smelter in Tacoma in the States, and then they would refine it and turn it into gold bricks. When the Kelowna Exploration Company was in, that's how it worked. But before that, when the Hedley Gold Mining Company was in, they would actually smelt, like I was showing you guys the smelter there. They would actually smelt their own gold bars. So there's been a lot of activity up here. It started back in the day, in early 1900s up until the late 20s, was underground mining, guys. Underground mining, so drifts, adits, shafts, stopes, winzes, all that stuff, right? Ore carts, and then ship the ore down. Then it went to an open pit mining operation, drilling and blasting. So you'll see some of these big fields that look like fields. They're actually been remediated. There's a big mine remediation program that went on up here. And so you'll see all these areas. These have all been remediated, buried. They actually took the tailings from the old mine sites and filled them in here and then covered it with grass and everything, right? They're trying to reclaim the land. But this is where all these prospectors found all this gold, guys. Like here, like all of this, that there, this is all reclaimed mining areas. And they've mined the hell out of this area, guys. 100 years. I'm pretty sure there's activity going on up here right now because of the price of gold the way it is. There's definitely, this is nice now. This is a nice road. There's definitely activity, but look, you can see this would have all been mined and remediated out. And then we're coming up to the nickel plate. There's a big open pit mine there. But basically, you've got two things going on when you're trying to separate, the settling ponds there, tailings ponds. When you've got two things going on here, guys. When you're trying to extract gold from ore, you've got that, doesn't require more advanced methods. The old way to do it, prospectors would carry a vial of mercury and then create an amalgam with the gold and the mercury. And then, that's how they would extract all their gold. Now, what they were doing here was they were using cyanide. So cyanide has the ability to draw gold and silver and other, precious metals like that out of the material that it's in into a cyanide solution. And then that cyanide solution, like I said, it forms like a black glob, basically, that is gold. The gold is actually black, and it's just a combination of the cyanide and the gold. And then that has to be smelted down and refined to actually pure gold. So the Daly Reduction plant was a cyanide plant, and it's basically gravity feed. So they have a series of crushers, jaw crushers, rod mills, all that stuff, ball mills, and they'd load the ore from the ore would get loaded up here, sent down on the first tramway down to Central. It would get moved over on Central down to the lower tram, and then it would head to the Daly Reduction plant. Once at the Daly Reduction plant, it would get dumped, the ore cars would get dumped, and then the ore from these mines would start to be crushed. And then after it got crushed and classified and put down to the right size, then it would have cyanide run through it. And as they run the cyanide through it, the gold will get picked up by the cyanide, put into a solution with the cyanide, and then that's what they keep, right? But the finer you crush the ore, generally the easier it is to, extract the cyanide, right? But a lot of this stuff was refractory gold, guys. Like they say it was free gold, but it wasn't free gold because it required way too much processing. And free gold can be processed through cyanation. The big thing is that a lot of the ore here is arsenopyrite, guys. What is arsenopyrite? Arsenopyrite is sulfur, right? Pyrite sulfur compounds. So arsenopyrite is arsenic and sulfur. Hard to extract, guys. That basically means it's refractory gold. So and the gold here is microscopic. So when you come up here, you're not going to see like chunks of it. Frankly, you can almost barely even tell because it's microscopic. You use other things as an indicator, such as, chalcopyrite, arsenopyrite, pyrite, silver, lead, zinc, copper, right? All these things I was saying before, sulfides. So we're coming up to the nickel plate townsite / nickel plate mine. There's nothing really here. I got to stop at some point and take a look. I just want to kind of drive up a bit more. Alrighty, guys, here we are, top of the nickel plate. So the big open pit is just over there. You can see though, look at the benches on the side. They've been very busy here, guys. Lots of stuff going on over here. Big slope. So this is the current mine, guys. They're back up here. The nickel plate part 5 or 6, I believe. You can see no trespassing, cameras, stop sign, the nickel plate. So they're obviously still working the mine up here, guys. There's still work going on, which is very, very interesting. But that's the gate. Yeah, so they're mining here, guys. This is a full-fledged open mine now. No public access. This is the road. You can see the benches. But basically, this is kind of the mining area, and it was big open pit mine. So you'd have loaders or excavators, depending on the style, which would be basically like, clearing the blasted rock. It's basically the same concept as underground mining. You do your drill pattern, you drill, you blast, the rock becomes a big powdery mess, and then you extract the stuff from the tunnel, right? In this case, the pit. That's a nice piece. Look, that's a good looking piece. Whereas open pit mining, everything's done on the surface. So they just blast all of this out and look for gold. And the gold was in such minuscule amounts, guys, in the ore that is hard to get out because it's so small. Say before, like you get these big chunks of free gold and stuff, or gold just sticking right out of the quartz. That's not going to happen here. It's more of a microscopic, and like I said, it's refractory gold because it's harder to get out. There's 2 types. It's refractory gold and free gold. Those are the 2 types. Free gold is easy to recover, a little bit of cyanidation. Or you've got refractory gold, which involves roasting and a whole bunch of other leaching, a whole bunch of other processes involved to actually get that ore. Initially, they had a flume that supplied water, but it had, in the summertime, in the wintertime, it had issues. So it wasn't a steady supply. It would freeze. So in 1913, 1914, they built a dam. But basically, the dam was built 1913, 1914, completed in 1915, and then that was what supplied water to the powerhouse and ran all the machinery, and then that was sent up to the mine, right? And they could run everything off that. But the powerhouse had some issues, so there was a flume from the dam that transported the water to the penstocks, which then came down into the turbines and actually produced the power. So what happened was they had a couple washouts and stuff, and they had to fix it. The forebay, which is kind of where all the water pooled before the penstock, that would get washed out. Then the flume would get washed out. They had some issues with the dam, so they had to fix the dam. They ended up driving across this river with a bulldozer to do some grading and stuff, fix things around there. And then the river came up really high, and they weren't able to get back across the river in the cat. So they just went over the dam, and then the cat totally destroyed the dam, crinkled it all up. So then it was a case of, okay, so the dam's been partially destroyed. So then they drilled a whole bunch of holes, blasted all of that out, and then basically had to rebuild the dam. And then the Kelowna Mining and Exploration Company came in, and that was kind of they were able to kind of help fix it. But that little dam was providing power to Hedley, all the mines up here, everywhere, right? And there was a few mines up here, the Canty mine as well. We're going to pass Riordan Mountain. That is garnet and gold deposits up there, named after one of the locals. But you can see, guys, it's all private property too, guys. No trespassing, so you can't really go anywhere. It's not really, which sucks because I wasn't sure, but I kind of figured with the prices of gold, the way they are nowadays, that they'd be mining more up here. And as you can see, look, full show, guys, nickel plate. So we're going to continue on. We're going to go past Apex Mountain, Mount Riordan, past the mines, the old graveyard, Nickel Plate Lake. There's another mine up past Nickel Plate Lake. So we're going to start coming into kind of more of the flats. We're come up Nickel Plate Mountain now, so now it's going to get flatter and flatter. Okay, guys. So we're really high up now. It's 11 degrees. It was 19 down in the valley. We're basically up at the top now. So do you remember how I told you that the Nickel Plate Road was built in the 30s, around 1937-ish, and it was way worse than it was now, believe it or not. It was even worse. And the cars were even harder to drive back then, Model Ts and stuff. But the only other way to get up to Nickel Plate, the town and the mine site back in the day, there was a full town up here, guys. This is like I showed you guys in the museum. It had houses, a community center, a skating rink. Like this was a fully, and all the food would get sent up the tram from Hedley. One of the tram operators' jobs was any supplies they needed would get forwarded to Hedley from, Princeton, Vancouver, Soyuz, Penticton, wherever you needed, right? Wherever it was coming from. And then they would just send it up the tram. And the tram had two incarnations, guys. At first it was gravity feed, which is cool, is literally just the weight of the buckets coming down the mountain is enough to power the cable. Just literally the weight of the buckets pulling the cable down the mountain is enough to make it act like a winch. And then the buckets that are empty going up, because they're light, they just get pulled up by the weight of the buckets going down. So it's called the gravity feed tram. It's really cool. Those old timers were really, really smart, guys. But the only problem with gravity feed trams is they use friction brakes. So I don't know, we got any, well, maybe some of you guys are pile drivers. We're the only ones that use them nowadays, but maybe some old iron workers. There's some old, I don't know what trades, who else would use them, but there's these things called friction cranes, guys. And they're very dangerous. So nowadays you've got hydraulic crane, which has hydraulics, and it's just fluid, right? Everything's actually, you pull a lever, it shoots out fluid through a hose, actuates a cylinder, and that moves everything. Boom, right? That's how the crane functions. Now, with a friction brake, with a friction crane, it's exactly what it sounds like. It runs on, this is the cemetery, guys. Yeah. I believe there's a couple of kids that are buried over there because they had some bad disease or something back in the day, and there's not many. A lot of the Chinese were exhumed from there and taken back to China because that's a big thing they do in China. Is they don't want to leave the Chinese here. They need to go back to China and be buried in China. So you'll find a lot of exhumed Chinese graves all over British Columbia because the Chinese, their ancestors would come back, dig up the grave, and then take them back to China, right? And bury them in China where they all wanted to be buried. But friction cranes, guys, are really dangerous because unlike a hydraulic crane where it's just cylinders and fluid and levers, a friction crane is like a dog in a there's a wedge basically, in the drum. And it moves in and out, and basically you've got these brakes that grab the cable, and the only thing stopping the weight of whatever load from falling down on the guys below the crane is this brake on the drum. And like I said, you can engage it with, it's usually engaged by like a wedge or something. You get any crane operators here, they'll explain it. But they're really old school cranes, guys. Like I said, nobody uses friction cranes anymore, but we use them a lot in bridge work and stuff, and marine construction. And because they're good for pile driving, when you need to drop something, you need to free fall something, friction crane is really good for just letting the load go, because basically the operator will have his foot on the brake, and if he lets his foot off that brake, the load's coming down. It's literally like if the brakes are wet, if they're running out, loads can just fall with no notice, So just same thing. My whole reason for explaining all this is the tram, guys. The gravity feed trams, as much as they're nice for, they're efficient, they're very dangerous, because if those brakes were to go, like if the brakeman didn't know his stuff, or, the brakes are old, or they're wet, or all kinds of things can happen, that tram would just free fall, right? Like completely, like there's nothing stopping it other than gravity, right? It's gravity powered. So eventually they went to electric power, which is a little safer, right? Because then all you got to do is just stop the electric motor and the tram stops, right? Like that is the brake. You don't have to, there is still brakes and stuff, but like you don't have to, you're not relying on basically two pads and a wedge keeping this whole thing in, right? And then you take your foot off that pedal, that wedge comes out, those brakes come out loose, and boom, right? The whole load comes down. That was the two incarnations of the tram. And the tram was really important because that's what sent all the ore down to the Daly Reduction plant. But this road, guys, this is how you would have gotten to the Nickel Plate before. You had to go all the way to Karamias, you had to go up to 3A, past Olalla, get Green Mountain Road, and drive all the way up Green Mountain Road to get to the Nickel Plate. And guys worked up here every day. This was their community every day. So in the 30s, everybody got really excited that the Nickel Plate Road opened up. And like I said, guys, what we drove today was nothing. It used to be way worse than that. And like I said, you had the Ambrose tree one of the locals, he was a mechanic, a truck driver. He even was one of the first welders. He bought a welder when they first came out and taught himself how to weld and started doing welding. He was quite a character, that guy. But anyways, he was hauling coal and stuff from Blakeburn in his Model T, and he was driving up here to come to the nickel plate. And like I said, he had those magnetos and those old Model Ts. So if you take your foot off the gas, your lights are getting dimmer, right? Or you stop to, anything, right? It's basically, you need to have the throttle down to have light for the Model T. But this part of the road itself isn't too bad because this is a ski resort, guys. People will drive up here in the wintertime to go skiing at Apex Mountain Ski Resort. So we're going to pass it in a little bit. It's a big ski community up here, chalets, lodges, and people would ski from Nickel Plate to Hedley regularly, right, in the wintertime. But the wintertime up here is brutal, guys. Like it's 9 degrees up here right now, and it's middle of summer. Okay, guys, so this is Apex Mountain Ski Resort. We're back on the pavement now. Look at that, eh? The pavement. I didn't know they paved this chunk. So this would be Green Mountain Road now. We're getting ready to join. But you can see there's like chalets up here. Everybody comes. Obviously, they don't take the Nickel Plate because you'd be insane to do that. But there's a house for sale. Anybody want to live up here? Cold winter, though. Oh, look at the red. Look at the red earth. Look how red that is, guys. That's a great sign, guys. That's a really good sign that you're coming into ground that's worth looking through. Look at that, eh? Nice and red. Wow.
Was.
Okay, guys, so we just turned on to Green Mountain Road. So Green Mountain Road gets its name from the Green Mountains in Vermont, which is a little randomly weird, but that comes from the fact that L.A. Clark, or Leonard Clark as he's formerly known, a lot of these guys went by 2 initials for their first and middle names. Leonard Clark, he was the one that built these roads, guys. He built the Nickel Plate Road, and he built the Green Mountain Road. And when I say built, he surveyed the route. And he measured the kilometers the way they would do it, guys, kind of similar to your odometer. The way it is basically the way your odometer works. He basically measured from a point on his wheel, the rotations, and then calculated from that the amount of distance, the circumference of the wheel, right, or the diameter. It rotates a certain amount of feet. He calculated that, marked the wheel in a spot, and then basically he knows how many feet he's going per one rotation. And then basically he used that to measure the miles and the distance from the Nickel Plate to the Nickel Plate Mine to Penticton. But Green Mountain Road, guys, this was the old wagon road. This was the old bush trail. And Green Mountain Road follows, like the road here, modern day, it follows the old wagon route. And Green Mountain Road was a big part of the wagon road to Penticton. So if you wanted to go from Hedley to Penticton, this was typically the way you would go, or Nickel Plate to Penticton. This is the way you would go to get to Penticton. It's kind of the big road, guys, the Green Mountain Road. It's a nice drive, too. So there would have been stagecoaches and wagons on here. But Leonard Clark, guys, he was the one that surveyed the Nickel Plate, too. M.K. Rogers, who was the mine manager, who was also the same guy that basically had enough knowledge to know that the ore that Wollaston and Arundel had brought to the fair in New Westminster, he saw that ore and changed his plans for the Cassiar and came out here. He paid $60,000 for the claims, which back then, $60,000. That's a huge amount of money, $60,000. But then now that he's paid the money, right, he was backed by Marcus Daly. He was a mining engineer, guys. Marcus Daly, who was a copper king from Butte, Montana. And when they were building the Daly Reduction plant, Daly died. Marcus Daly died. So then his estate ended up being the ones that looked after the assets. But M.K. Rogers was the mining engineer that Marcus Daly had hired. And M.K. Rogers was been all over the world, guys. He'd been to Guatemala, Australia, British Columbia, Alaska. That's the life of a mining engineer, right? You just travel around looking at ore. And so he knew his stuff, guys. He was very educated. He knew his stuff. He knew what he was looking at. He knew mining. He knew gold. He knew ore. And M.K. Rogers he was the mine manager for a long time. And like I said, Robert Hedley, which Hedley gets its name from, was a mining engineer who grub-staked Peter Scott. Peter Scott staked the Rollo. That was another claim, right? That was before Wollaston and Arundel. That's what I was saying, guys. I love Bill Barley, not to disparage Bill Barley at all, but he was known for telling stories. And I remember I was in the museum, the Hedley Museum at another time, and was talking to some of the museum staff, and they said, yeah, that story's false, right? Because I asked, never been to Hedley before, and I was like, so is that whole story about, the 2 greenhorns that asked for help and went over the mountain and found gold? Is that like a thing? And they said, no, it's not. They're like, that's a it's a blown up story, right? But that was what Bill Burley did, right? He was a storyteller. He told stories. Dewdney had guys staking up that area in 1894, 4 years before Arundel and Wollaston staked it. And then Wollaston and Arundel, they kind of just fell off the face of the earth after, but, you know, they probably went back to England as rich men and became, you know, rich British people, basically. It happens to every guy, right? You make a discovery and all of a sudden you think you're the guy that's got the golden touch, and everywhere you go, you're just going to pull over gold, right? That happens to a lot of guys, especially when you get gold fever. Like when you start getting on gold, and, you know, maybe some of you guys know from your claims, you start mining and you get all this confidence and you think, oh, you know, no shovel can go wrong, right? And then you put a shovel in, you get nothing, and then it's a little bit of a sobering thing, right? But a lot of these guys would happen. They'd find these mines and they'd get this huge high and they got all this money, and then they'd usually blow it all at the bar or gambling, or, you know, at the brothels and stuff, the bordellos in town. And then they have to go back to mining. It's just dumb luck, frankly, guys, most of the time. Like, there is some skill involved, like I said, knowing where to look, knowing what to look for, knowing how to look, and then also knowing what to do with it once you find it. But there's nothing stopping, and this has happened numerous places. Guys that know nothing about mining, have no experience, don't even really know that it's a thing, will just wander across and be like, hey, what's this? And, oh, that's a huge gold nugget you just found, right? So a lot of it is just, like I said, guys, it's just dumb luck. But this is Green Mountain Road, guys, and then this is going to take us up to, I saw signs for the Marin Valley. So we're going to be up near Drow. Fairview, guys, Orofino Mountain. Make sure you check that video out. I did a video all about Fairview, Orofino Mountain. We're coming through Fairview and Orofino Mountain territory. So this is a really nice area, guys. Okay, guys, so coming to the end of this one for today. Look at it. Sunny Okanagan, guys, 26 degrees. It's nice. Penticton. So we just completed Green Mountain Road. I wasn't planning on it. I took a wrong turn. Supposed to go back to Karaminas. I didn't realize at the time. But we drove the whole of Green Mountain Road, so we ended up in Penticton, and now we're in Penticton, and we're just going to drive south down the Okanagan, the usual drive to Osoyoos, basically. So, right near the border. But anyways, guys, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get notified, and Sasquatch Prospector out.